Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the United States Transhumanist Party meeting here at RAAD Fest 2019 on October 6th. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We appreciate your presence here. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I'm the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. With me, I have our recently announced presidential candidate, Johannon Ben Zion. As well, we have Brent Reitze, our director of publication. It's great to have you all here. So, just by a show of hands, how many of you were present at the U.S. Transhumanist Party meeting about a year and 1 month ago during RAAD Fest 2018? Raise your hands if you were there. So, a few of you. Excellent. And you may recall, I started out that meeting outlining our hopes for the upcoming year, in particular the presidential primary process, which was very much a concept. At that time, I had outlined my objectives for that process, for getting candidates to come forward, for selecting a candidate who would be a good, articulate spokesperson for the ideas of transhumanism. And it's an opportune moment for me to be able to say that I think all of the goals that were outlined at last year's meeting have been fulfilled. We had our presidential primary process. We actually had quite a vigorous, competitive primary, more so than I had anticipated. But at the end of it, I think we have an excellent result. We do have a candidate who has been a tireless spokesperson for the ideas of transhumanism, for life extension, for technological progress. He's a highly policy-minded individual. He likes to think in terms of practical implementations of ideas, ways for getting from here to there. So I think the election did what it was intended to do, which was to enable the most qualified candidate to win, the candidate who put in the most effort, who built the most bridges within the transhumanist community. The way the ranked preference voting system works, which is quite different from the plurality or first past the post voting system, is that a person can't just come in with a preset number of supporters and have those supporters be very vocal or even strident and capture the nomination just through the strength of that faction. Because with the ranked preference voting method, people don't just vote for their top choice, they rank order all of their choices. So if somebody is alienating a lot of people, that person will get ranked last on many voters' ballots. If someone is trying to reach out to people, build bridges, find common ground, maybe those people still prefer another candidate, but that bridge builder is not going to get ranked last. That bridge builder might get ranked second or third. And it's interesting, in our election, we had 7 rounds of instant runoffs. Ben began with a plurality of votes, but not a majority during the first round. So every round, one candidate was eliminated. And at first, candidates who had very low vote totals or the none of the above option were eliminated, and a few votes were reassigned to other candidates. Eventually, we got to candidates who had substantial vote totals in the 10% range. And ultimately, Ben won the election with 160 out of 312 votes. Thank you to everybody who voted. I know many of you in this room voted. It was an interesting process because we actually compelled our voters to make an informed decision in that they couldn't just vote for one candidate. I configured the voting form so that one had to make some sort of selection for each candidate, ranked 1 through 9, and one had to put one selection in each row and in each column. I had to provide some technical support for people who did not understand that concept, because it's a bit new to some individuals. A lot of people are used to, when voting, just ticking one box. But this is an outcome that I think is more reflective of a thoughtful, deliberative process where people had to look up the candidates, they had to look up what they stood for. We provided an even playing field for the candidates. So we asked them the same questions for their candidate profiles, and we published the profiles on our website so that people could compare the answers. We had debates in which each candidate was asked the same question, and I was the moderator. I kept time, and instead of, as in the conventional debates, the candidates trying to shout over one another, kind of trying to game the system a bit. In the Republican debates and the Democratic debates, sometimes the candidates will deliberately go over their time, and unless the moderator shuts them down, they get away with it. So what I did instead was I allowed the candidates to go over the allotted time, but I would subtract their available time from subsequent questions so that at the end, each candidate had approximately the same time. Some candidates had leftover time because I allowed them to bank time as well, and they would either use it or they would voluntarily relinquish it. But that way they each got in what they had to say, but they didn't, at least in most circumstances, do it in an acrimonious fashion. If this had been the conventional debate structure, it could have been a lot worse. So I think we've learned a lot of lessons from this election. We've learned perhaps what we could do in the future to make the process even more reflective of the values that transhumanists hold. A few ideas I have along these lines would be to create some sort of weighted vote system that reflects a person's dedication to transhumanist ideas, a person's knowledge of our platform, of the Transhumanist Bill of Rights. And this is one area where I would welcome your input in the course of this meeting. How do we do this in a way that is objective and easy to verify? Let's say somebody is really well versed in the idea of transhumanism. And while everyone gets one vote, we might want to give that person 2 votes. But how do we do that in a way that applies consistent standards across the board? So one suggestion might be have them take some sort of quiz that would demonstrate their knowledge. But how do we get them to take the quiz without running the risk of people sharing their quiz answers with others and thereby kind of creating a fake constituency of well-versed transhumanists when in reality one of them just shared their answer key. So it almost has to be a situation where we know the person, we know that the person really knows about our party and about its values. So I would welcome your input there. How can we do it in an objective and verifiable manner? And I think those of you in this room would actually benefit from such a system because you have been involved in the movement for a long time and you do know what we stand for. Another subject that I would like to discuss today is how do we go forward with the Ben Zion 2020 campaign and make an impact on the general public. So we had been focused during the election season essentially inward within the movement, trying to figure out what candidate we should select, what would be the ideal messaging for that candidate, and that was very much a choice of our members. Now that that's finished, we have more of an opportunity once again to focus on growth, to focus on outreach to the general public, to those people who aren't as familiar with our movement yet, who might be sympathetic if only they knew the extent to which the science has advanced and the extent to which we are on the cusp of solving some of the major problems of our society. I think Zoltan Istvan did a great job in 2016 with his Immortality Bus campaign, raising public awareness. The Immortality Bus, however, is not going to be able to make another trip. It was an old, converted 1978 RV that I think Zoltan was fortunate to be able to get across the country after fixing the numerous leaks that sprung up along the way. So that is now a piece of history. But what can we do that is analogous to the Immortality Bus that would have a similar degree of impact, but yet would also be novel, would attract attention, would not just be seen as a repeat of Zoltan's campaign, but would break new ground? So I will now let Ben give his thoughts about what he hopes to see in his campaign, and some of his ideas for moving forward.
Yes. So one of the key campaign promises, largely independent of the platform matters that we discussed at great length, was to build this organization to 10,000 members. That would be approximately five-fold increase. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I think we're already well on our way to doing. We have a piece coming out in Medium Magazine in just a few days. Our friend Alex Perlman is writing about this primary election and the aftermath. And we've had quite a number of press opportunities here at RAAD Fest, including some with folks sitting here among us right now, and that's been really wonderful. We want to be getting the word out about the Futurist New Deal and this campaign, and we are starting to see this snowball effect. I'm really excited and pleased. I want to say a word or two on the primary. A word of thanks to people who are kind enough to sit with me and support my campaign. Thank you, Dr. Jose Cordero, for that. That was really wonderful. You gave me strength in a time when we were just beginning to gather that momentum. And so, thank you again. I also want to thank Charlie Cam. He was the very first person to endorse. The very first person to endorse my campaign, and I was so pleased. He was a real rock at that time. And Charlie Cam has been called the heart and soul of RAAD Fest. He's got the truest heart and soul of a longevity advocate. And I was extremely honored when I asked him to be my running mate, and he accepted. So we're going to be working together. Thank you so much, Charlie. Really looking forward to this, and we can all be working together to raise awareness for life extension, folks. We know that folks are beginning to realize that we are on the cusp of something great here with achieving super longevity, and it's not a hard sell. We just have to be talking to everyone we know. We have to be on the front lines and creating those network effects. More and more people becoming engaged in this notion. It hastens this techno-progress, and the very best of techno-progress for us is certainly, I believe, life extension, and that is the thing that we were doing. Dr. Bill Falloon, the organizer of this event, RAAD Fest, he spoke of how in 2009 there was not the large body of scientific evidence in support of life extension that there is today. It's very heartening that we now have so much that we can be pointing to in this world that we can be saying to people, this is something that we will achieve in the coming years. And it is a wonderful opportunity. The United States Transhumanist Party, we do have charter documents which describe at some length the things that we stand for. And number one pillar of the United States Transhumanist Party is life extension. We are the life extension party in the United States. My campaign slogan is radical life extension is closer than you think, as I've said. And I believe that's true. I think all of you recognize that. And I thank you for coming to RAAD Fest and showing your support for this notion. I thank you for coming here and speaking with us. And I look forward to speaking with all of you and seeing how we can advance this agenda at this incredible time.
Bravo.
Excellent. Well said, Ben. And I truly believe life extension can be a mainstream idea. It could be a new unifying principle for our society and our culture. Transhumanism is unique among contemporary social and philosophical movements in that it truly focuses on what unites all of us as human beings. We all have certain limitations and vulnerabilities and problems that we face today, the chief among those being death and disease. And it is time to overcome the fragmentation of our society and our politics, the kind of identity politics that has emerged out of postmodernism. I think it's time for a post-postmodernism, which is transhumanism. And how to communicate that to the general culture is going to be our task. I think most people can be persuaded to become part of our movement. And indeed, ordinary people with whom I've spoken who hadn't had a lot of exposure to our movement have generally been mildly receptive. Some have been enthusiastic, a few have been a bit skeptical, but nobody has issued a death threat to me when we had events. Nobody picketed us or told us that we should be banned or prevented from holding the event. We held the Cyborg and Transhumanist Forum in 2019 at the Nevada State Legislature, where we successfully achieved an amendment to Assembly Bill 226 to remove some proposed prohibitions on voluntary microchip implantation. So we essentially turned a bill that could have been a serious infringement on civil liberties into a bill that just prohibited governments, employers, insurance companies, and bail agents from requiring microchip implants. And of course, we don't want any technology to be required. But in the process of doing that outreach, in the process of sitting in the legislative building and talking to lobbyists, legislators, staffers, we did not meet substantial resistance. There were some questions asked. A lot of people were really curious and intrigued. But nobody boycotted us, protested us, thought that we should be expelled from the building. And that's a lesson, I think, to many transhumanists. Sometimes people in our movement overestimate the extent of public resistance. They overestimate the extent of skepticism toward our ideas. We have some critics, it's true, but those critics are not the majority of the population. I think for the majority of the population, the challenge of reaching them isn't overcoming resistance, it's achieving basic awareness. We have an awareness gap still, and I think that's because sometimes people don't see what we're doing. The media may see what we're doing. Intellectuals may see what we're doing. But to what extent does, say, a person in a typical family situation working an 8-to-5 job, maybe working multiple jobs, having strained finances, see what we're doing? So this was the genius of Zoltan Istvan when he undertook his Immortality Bus campaign. People couldn't fail to see the Immortality Bus driving through the streets of their city. People couldn't fail to see this very distinctive individual running for President of the United States. That's why he got so much coverage. That's why he got 100 million page views to his website, even though the website itself was fairly bare bones. It was just a striking concept, the Immortality Bus. And again, I will be interested in everyone's ideas of what we can do to achieve something of analogous impact. But first, Brent, I would invite you to share your observations about the election, where we are, where you hope to see the Transhumanist Party.
All right. So the Transhumanist Party, since it's one of the few, it's the only political organization currently advocating for transhumanist policy ideals in the United States, from a party system basis is is it unique, but it also means that we also have opportunities not just to change public awareness of the transhumanist movement, but also moving forward here there's another angle that we can move forward with here is that the option of the Transhumanist Party to make waves in the U.S. system is slightly limited due to how the system was. You heard Gennady talk about the success of our ranked choice voting system within the party. That to me I've been an advocate for a long time, and that's something that we can also advocate for as a party membership in all of our own states. The ranked choice system is being put forward by a few groups. Fairvote.org is one, but that's another angle that you can work for. It's like, look, there is someone out there that has a better message for the country. There is someone that has a better options for how all of us can live, but our current system keeps them blocked. It keeps them from ever really gaining ground and from allowing a more educated electorate. Because it's, as you've probably heard a lot of people say, who cares who wins? Who cares who runs? You know, I have to pick one or the other. I don't care at all. The ranked choice system allows people to get enthused who they want to see elected. And if we can get that put into law into more areas, then we can actually get the people who we actually believe care about our issues into legislature. So not just for the presidential election as a whole, but even state by state, we can begin to make more of a difference. And while this campaign is based on public awareness of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, at some point we want the campaign to grow enough that it becomes a legitimate political force, or not, it is a legitimate political force, but that it's seen to the public as we can do this, and we can make a difference, and we can actually start making change within our own country with it. And that's what I would like to see us move forward with, expanding, getting the ideas, and like, hey, these ideas are great, why is no political candidate running with them? What can we do to make that an option so that they actually could run for our interest?
Yes, yes. And that is indeed exactly what we should seek to accomplish. The presidential campaign hopefully will not be the only campaign that we run. The presidential campaign is about raising public awareness. Mm-hmm. We know that our chances of winning the presidency in 2020 are minimal. However, that's not the point. I think a lot of people who say, well, you shouldn't do this unless you can win, are missing the value of the publicity that could be gained through running. And yet, I think there are certain offices that transhumanists would be capable of winning. Local offices, maybe state legislative offices, where there's some opportunity to run as an independent, particularly in a district where there's not as much polarization, or maybe there's so much polarization that everybody is disillusioned with the mainstream options. So I would encourage those of you who have any political aspirations to think about running for office at those levels. If there's a seat on the city council or the county commissioners board or in the state legislature that you think you could win, the only constraint is that we wouldn't be able to endorse you if you run as a member of another political party. So we don't want to be in a position where we're endorsing Democrats or Republicans or even Libertarians, because that would run the risk of making us an auxiliary arm of one of those parties. And as soon as we dive into that political fray, as soon as we start taking sides in that combat, we lose our distinctiveness, we lose our relevance as transhumanists. And I think the emphasis should always be on what makes transhumanism unique, what makes transhumanism capable of uplifting everyone and transcending the limits of contemporary politics.
I think that would be a good part of the campaign moving forward as well, is to expand out. We're raising awareness for our candidate. You, too, could potentially be part of it in your local sphere.
Yes.
May I ask a question on that? Because I simply don't know. It's my understanding that quite a few local offices, I have friends who are in Port Oregon City Council, those are all pretty much nonpartisan,
Yes.
I believe. So is there some way we can promote the transhumanist meme set in a nonpartisan election?
Very much so. And thank you for bringing that up, because I actually ran as a nonpartisan candidate for the Board of Trustees of the Indian Hills General Improvement District in northern Nevada in 2018. And there were no party affiliations that could be identified, but I had a platform that I consider to have been consistent with transhumanist ideas. And the Transhumanist Party, even where we don't have ballot access, is perfectly free to endorse an independent or nonpartisan candidate. We could hold an internal vote, and if our members agree, we can issue an endorsement. Indeed, anyone can issue an endorsement. You as an individual can issue an endorsement, or a private group can issue an endorsement. But we have the unique advantage of our internal voting mechanisms that actually try to discern the preferences of our members and get a gauge of how representative that candidate would be of transhumanist ideals. So we did hold a vote to endorse my candidacy in 2018, and I had offered various people to be independent observers of that election so that they could see that people actually voted the way they did. I'm happy to say that endorsement was unanimous. And
so basically what I hear you saying is that even in a nonpartisan election, we would get, for instance, if our ideals and values were consistent with the Transhumanist Party, we'd get endorsed by the Transhumanist Party on our literature.
Yes, on our literature, absolutely. On our websites, we could spread awareness of that candidate, and we could essentially get people both in the local area and beyond to recognize them. Now, I had many votes in that election from people who weren't transhumanists, but who liked what I had to offer for the neighborhood. Indeed, I was approached by the chairman of the board a few weeks ago who told me, well, one of the board members is retiring in 2020, so would you please consider running again? I'm going to seriously consider running again, given that the current board has been receptive to my participation. And I've been regularly attending the board meetings, offering my input as a resident of the district. One of the tips that I would have for anyone seeking to be a candidate is really get to know your local area, really get to know the issues in that area and the people, and connect with them, find out what they care about, because any sort of victory, I think, arises from a coalition of interests. And you use that opportunity to inject a transhumanist message in a way that is, let's say, relatable to those people. So if you have a situation where the job that you're applying for, the position you're running for, involves infrastructure maintenance, then consider how technology can be used to improve that infrastructure, to make life easier for people. In every sphere of life, technology can provide benefits. And really, for transhumanists, the goal is to shift that discourse from what I would call social combat to technological solutions. Some of our critics would accuse us pejoratively of solutionism. That's a term that they invented, but I think we can appropriate that term. We can appropriate solutionism as a positive, as something we should strive toward. Why not solve our problems? Natasha?
I know that we could ask from the audience. So, okay, going back just a few moments to where you were talking about the parameters of having the party and what the party can do and not do legally. Gabriel Rothblatt is working with me and some others on a PAC. Mm-hmm. Most people know what a PAC is, right? So that could provide the momentum for the Transhumanist Party. Any transhumanist party, whether it's the U.S. Transhumanist Party, I think there's Longevity Party, there's other different parties. But the PAC would provide the information, the intellectual acumen, the probably the energy force for allowing or allotting the candidates that run on your party ticket to associate with meaningful issues that are not just local but global. So I think that would be very good. And the PAC is something that anyone could belong to. Humanity Plus cannot do it because we cannot be involved in politics, but it would be outside. It could be a corporate structure within the government as a PAC. So I think that's something that's very much needed in this community. And again, it would help fuel your principles and your directives. The other thing I wanted to mention is how going forward in the future would you screen your candidates so that we don't have what we experienced, because I got another message yesterday. So how do we screen, and how do we, without hurting people's feelings and without seeming to be biased? Now that is a very fine line there, and we don't want it to look like any other than the person committing to a certain behavior or attitude or acknowledging a set of principles. How are you going to address that?
Yes, and I have been thinking about that. Actually, one thought that I had floated earlier on in this meeting was attempting to set up a weighted vote structure for the members, so that if one of our members has been more involved in the field of transhumanism, is more knowledgeable about the field of transhumanism, has more awareness of our party documents, our platform, our core ideals, our Transhumanist Bill of Rights, that person could demonstrate that knowledge somehow and get additional voting power. And perhaps that could be applied to candidacy as well, if there could be some sort of knowledge test for the candidates, some sort of way to ensure that the candidates really studied our documents as well and came to an informed decision to run.
Do you have along those lines, and I know that Rudy or I think Jose had a question.
Yes.
Along those lines, are there any type of ethical principles, and this I'm bringing my teach ethics, so what are the ethical principles that you would set as part of the stature for your organization, that if someone maybe has immoral behavior or unethical, let's get into the law then, moral is personal, ethical is legal. So there needs to be some kind of screening for ethical behaviors in the public arena that would disqualify someone, not based on hearsay, not based on gossip, but based on physical or written actions.
Yes, I agree with you. Now, we have the beginnings of that, I think, at present in our Constitution. For instance, we have a clause that automatically disqualifies anyone who committed a violent crime from being a member of the Transhumanist Party until they've performed the appropriate recompense for that crime. And that could be extended.
Could cyberstalking be a crime?
I think cyberstalking could be a crime,
okay, so.
And I think a variety of other behaviors could be encompassed in that.
Okay.
Jose?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you, Gennady, for keeping this alive, and for members like Brent, who have been very active, and obviously our candidate, Ben Zion, and to see how we can help you to take these ideas more broadly into the public. As you know, I just ran for the European elections and I got 7,000 votes. The Germans were more successful, but they had been campaigning for 4 years. They got 71,000 votes. And then another friend in England got 3,000 votes for all these longevity ideas. Just as a proposal, because I think the Immortality Bus was fantastic, and it got a lot of publicity, and this is what we need, what you need, I think. One of my proposals for Europe was the creation of the European Agency for Anti-Aging. And obviously this attracts a lot of attention, and I think it was important. So something like that maybe done here also in the USA. I don't know what are your plans, but whatever it is, try to think big, disruptive, otherwise you will not call people's attention. Mm-hmm. And also because media are so expensive, we need to, traditional media, we need to have to use more social media. Mm-hmm. And I hope Brent and the team there, Gennady, is good at that too. Because there are very few resources for political campaigns, especially for new parties.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There could be stickers we could put on cars. I mean, you know, just you have X number of people within a certain community have a sticker, not like Child on Board and not like Transhumanists or Crowdists on Board, but you know, something part of the message. I think you just gave a short synopsis of a message, and I think it was Brent gave a message that could be delivered, but some smart, concise phrase that is really catchy, even a tune that could be played, you know, that people have on their phones rather than the ringtone that we're provided on our smart devices. Maybe there's a tune that could be part of the Transhumanist Party as a audio logo or trademark.
Really?
Charlie Camp will work on that.
Yes, those are great ideas. Thank you. Thank you. Now we are kind of in our brainstorming session. So what are some other ideas that you would have to make a high impact, to have high visibility for the Transhumanist Party in the coming year? Yes, David.
I'm a relatively new member to the party, so I certainly don't claim to, understand the actual, party mechanics too well yet. But a suggestion I would have about the message, something that probably the thing that attracts me the most to the Transhumanist Party is that I believe this technological process or progress is going to happen. It's going to happen regardless, and it's really important that we find solutions to the problems that are posed by that technological progress before the progress happens. And I think that that's a great bridge to normal people, is not trying to so much sell them on the idea of super longevity and things like that, but coming at it from a perspective of, look, this is going to happen anyway. It's going to happen regardless of whether or not you agree with it, and there's going to be a massive amount of benefit to all of us from it. But there will also be some reorganization of society and our economy and everything required, and somebody needs to start having a conversation about what we're going to do to address those problems. And that can be done in a way that remains positive. Of course, we don't want to do that in a way that makes people focus on the problems that that can be caused, but rather that this can happen somewhat more chaotically, or it can happen in a more structured and planned way because we're having a conversation.
So something along the lines of like, progress is happening, so make it happen right.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
Yes, thank you. Rudy.
Speaking back into that idea, is there and along with Natasha's, is there a official tagline that would be related to transhumanism? Transhumanism means foresight. Transhumanism means thinking ahead, or something that would fit on a bumper sticker. A simple, few-word phrase that has some cogency and impact and power.
Yes.
I'm sorry if it's obvious, and I should know that.
Well, the Transhumanist Party does have a tagline. It originated back from Zoltan's days. It is putting science, health, and technology at the forefront of politics. My one contribution to that tagline was putting the Oxford comma before the and, because I consider that to be absolutely essential.
It is.
But yes, I do think it encapsulates what we stand for as the Transhumanist Party. We wish to put science, health, and technology at the forefront of politics rather than what is currently at the forefront of politics, which is petty partisan bickering. So that appeals to a certain segment of the population.
Awfully intellectual. Is there anything that has additional punch? I don't know if this is a brainstorming session or not.
Feel free to make any suggestions along those lines. Yes.
So I don't know much about it, but didn't the right to try law make it through this year?
It did make it through last year, the federal right to try law. The only problem with the federal right to try law is only 2 patients so far have been granted the right to try.
I'm wondering if that kind of cracks the door open, if we can expand on that. You know, BioViva's doing all these things outside the country. Eventually, if we can get that stuff in here.
Oh, I completely agree with you.
Maybe that's something we could put on our platform or whatever.
Yes, advocating for an expanded and streamlined right to try, I think, would be important. I think the problem right now with even explicit, accelerated, or innovative pathways that various federal agencies establish is that they're still onerous, they're still full of bureaucracy and full of paperwork. It's just a different kind of bureaucracy and paperwork. Yes?
Yeah, another thing, with the right to try, you start getting into biohacking and grinders and the whole area within the bioarts of people experimenting on themselves, and there's been a lot of really illegal and dangerous actions that have taken place within that community. So it's the right to try what? How? Who are your advisors? Who's watching? Who's paying attention? Anyone who starts hacking their body without a medical doctor in the specific field in which he or she is hacking their body is making a big leap towards infection. I'll just put it that way.
Maybe breakthrough or a scientific breakthrough.
Yes,
I think that we have to be more careful about infection. In fact, we need to be very careful about snake oil salespeople telling us we can do something, or the influx of stem cells doing this and that and the other thing, when on the other hand they can cause tumors and cancers. So how many medical doctors are in the room that could help out here? Okay. So we need to have more medical doctors within our arena to talk to us logically about self-experimentation. Now, I've self-experimented for decades, and in some areas I've been successful, in other areas I've not been successful. And one of my experiences caused cancer, okay? And I wasn't experimenting on my body, I was doing it unintentionally. But that environment that I put myself in caused me bladder cancer. Very serious cancer. So you want to be careful about any of those areas, and for the USTP to promote that, I think would be going down the wrong path and against what Zoltan was saying. Healthier means being smarter. Healthier, if you're going to hack on your own body, which I believe in, there's nothing wrong with it, have a doctor. Have a medical doctor highly qualified in that area and an advisory team working with you that is extremely knowledgeable about it.
If you can get one to do it.
Yes, you can. There's plenty.
No, I've had problems with it. I can't talk to my doctor and tell him anything. I have to educate
him.
Change
doctors.
Where?
Where do you live?
I live in the desert.
Well, there are interesting... Yes, there are interesting possibilities.
Separate organization of trying to create a database of longevity doctors.
Right.
So I think we'll need to address
that would be a problem.
I actually spoke last night with a friend of mine who just founded a startup called Qualitude, and it has a very simple business model. Metformin currently is a very safe drug, but it's only available by prescription in the United States. So this startup has essentially amassed a network of doctors throughout the country who have been informed of the benefits of metformin for non-diabetics and who would be willing to prescribe the drug remotely after getting some basic patient information. So that's the kind of innovation that could overcome your issue.
He wouldn't do it.
Yes.
Well, you know, the American Medical Association does have a certain rigor to it, and to be a practicing doctor, you have to abide by the American Medical Association, and that's why some people may go to Tijuana to get whatever they're
Yes.
getting.
And they're facing very real fears of being sued, so they're very conservative.
Well, no, they're being wise, just like
Well,
an attorney would be wise.
Not for me, they're maybe for themselves, but not for me.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I think a directory of longevity doctors at some
Yeah,
point is
I
going to
think
really
it's-
be
yeah,
needed. So
with
you can
some-
find the ones who,
yeah.
because, they're conservative by their point of views from what their training has told them. Very few of them have actually kept up. I mean, as he talked in 2009 when it started off, it was they didn't have a lot of the tech we have now.
Yes.
And certainly knows the doctors haven't kept
You know,
up with that.
That's a good point, too.
You know.
But I still have a real problem with standard of care.
Mhm.
I have a real problem with that because it's killing people.
Yeah.
And the FDA is killing people. I talked to a man last night. He claims he was at the first booth of it. He says 10 million people have died because his technology hasn't been approved yet.
There's a
It's been taking 10
whole
years.
lot
10 million people are now
medical
dead
overhauls that need to be done.
because of him for one treatment.
Yes, and I think this is where transhumanists can add value because we have information about what treatments are safer versus what treatments are riskier. We have experts within our community who can attest to that. And there are some irrational policies in the United States, like the idea that metformin requires a prescription, but cigarettes and alcohol do not. How is that logical? How is that logical? And I think there are many areas where informed tweaks or amendments to the law can be made without it causing just rampant self-experimentation by uninformed individuals. Of course, people shouldn't just start injecting substances into themselves that they know nothing about. And the goal, I think, of the transhumanist community should be to improve public awareness of what treatments are efficacious and safe and what treatments aren't. But right now, there's not necessarily an alignment between efficacious and safe and legal and readily available. And that's the discrepancy that we need to seek to overcome. Yes?
Just for curiosity, people in the U.S., they can't buy metformin even through internet or something, or it's just the case that they cannot get it in the drugstores? Because
I can speak to that.
Yes.
I ordered mine through International Longevity Associates. So they're
How do you know how many milligrams to order?
half of basically I read the literature. I'm taking half a gram twice a day.
Okay, half a gram twice a day. And so then that's another issue. Once you get it, then you can't self-prescribe. I mean,
No, the thing is, I was asking that because in Spain, I live in Madrid, you can buy it as you were buying candies. I mean, it's
Right.
just
Yeah,
no
same thing in
recipe,
Mexico, but if you
very
go to
cheap.
Australia,
You
you
just
can't
go
even,
in any single pharmacy, you can buy metformin. They don't ask you anything.
you go to Australia, you can't buy vitamins without a prescription.
Yes.
Basically, if it's not a controlled substance, you can buy it on the internet. But to her point, I mean, self-prescribing is probably not a good idea most of the time. I mean,
it's
maybe,
not a good idea.
yeah. But
Well,
I mean,
in Australia,
all
you
the
can't
stuff.
even get vitamins. You go through the vitamin thing, it's like about, the selection is like this big.
Yes, and I think it's important to note different countries have different legal regimes with regard to which drugs are available as prescription only, which drugs are available over the counter, and I think it's important to consider the fact people aren't dying in mass in Spain or in Mexico or in other countries where drugs are more readily available. So there is at least a certain significant degree of movement toward greater freedom that we certainly could advocate without adverse health consequences.
That would be a good platform.
Yes.
Free it up. Take on the FDA, take on the idea that you can't get medical treatment until you're sick. Prevention is not pushed.
One thing, Gennady, speaking to that, the Arizona State University has a governance conference every year, and I've spoken at it every year for the past, I guess, 3, 4, 5 years, I don't know how long. But it takes place at the Sarah O'Connor Legal Center downtown Phoenix. And you should speak at that conference. There's FDA speakers who come. We've had many debates on the FDA. In one of my talks, I was addressing this very issue about the transhumanist objectives towards healthcare for longevity, and that we needed quicker processing of patents, number
Right.
one. Number two, quicker processing of acceptance and testing. And people should opt into programs which would be, I don't know the terminology used earlier. It's a test to, I think, I don't know, it was Jose or someone said it, but where if you don't have to be terminal to test it.
Right.
You have a right of your body. You
Yes.
own your body. You have a right, and it should be a civil right, that if you want to test a drug that is in the process of testing through the FDA after it's gone through all the scientific rigor and it's been proven that it does work, because it's not going to get to the FDA until it's gone through a lot of scientific rigor. So by that time, it's already been proven that it works. Now that the FDA has to go over that paperwork and check it out, and et cetera, et cetera. But there should be a program that Transhumanist Party supports that is, if people want to opt, I guess it would be opt into that program, where they're not terminal, they don't have 3
Right.
months to live, they've got 99 years to live,
Right.
or 200 years to live, but they still want to test it because they do have a disease. That is their body and that's their right. So getting into the platform and back to politics and away from medicine, some of the civil rights of people in the United States are being tampered with by the government. And whichever way it's going to go, those people who run the government, the politicians, the FDA pretty much runs everything. It's an extreme bureaucracy. You
Yes.
cannot fight them. You have to slowly infiltrate or put them on edge. Now, the issue there becomes they do not want to change their terminology, and this was the issue that went in during my talk. An FDA person was sitting there saying, I said the FDA needs to change their terminology to accept the terms longevity and life extension. And he said, no, we're not changing our terminology. You need to change your terminology. And it was very shocking. But I think we do need to ask them to change their terminology. However, we do need to collaborate and work with them. So we do need to change our terminology. One of the terminologies that was changed through the meetings prior to the conference, we decided to use the phrase mitigating aging rather than longevity, or mitigating disease. Not to say aging is a disease. That was like, you can't say that quite yet, but at least mitigating disease rather than life extension.
It's fine to be cooperative with the FDA, but not to be controlled by them.
Right.
I agree with you 100% on that.
On that subject, I think we should congratulate a ranking officer from the Humanity Plus organization, Paul Spiegel. He was
yes.
He is a tremendous attorney for transhumanism and a wonderful entrepreneur. But he was also recently appointed to a diplomatic position in San Marino, doing precisely this kind of work. He was kind enough to allow me to interview him on this subject. But he is establishing and working to establish this life extension public health service in this small country. If this is something that can be achieved, where these funds are being shifted towards prevention,
Yes, and maybe this could be
it could be an example to the entire world
Yes.
that life extension is a viable concept. The rest of us would have no choice but to follow suit if one country were able to establish a life extension service that was functioning in this way.
Yes.
I agree with that. I think also one principle we should advocate is if a drug or a device or therapy has been approved by a regulatory agency in another country with similar standards, for instance, Canada or Japan, then there's no reason for the FDA to subject it to trials that take over a decade and billions of dollars. That's just duplicative effort.
Yes. And that needs to be brought to the forefront. Yes.
What I wanted to say is I love this conversation. I think what we need to do, though, during the campaign, though, is get specific examples of these things out there. If we can find a specific
There's a
example
specific
of
example.
something and attach ourselves to
There's an
it.
example of that for 10 million deaths on that first booth. When you walk in, that product starts with a Y. I can't spell it. It's just that Y something TTT something. And you talk to him, that runs it. It's the guy that's there. He says 10 million people have died in the last 10 years. 10 million.
But it can't be hearsay.
But I don't want to generalize it. I want to make it specific. Put
It's
a name
specific.
and a face
It's
on it,
specific.
and then we can attach ourselves.
Yes.
This is
Well, I
specific.
think what he's saying is you need the story. You need the story of one person usually.
Exactly.
He's your guy. Here's your guy. The one that does angiogenesis. The first booth on the left, you walk in.
Thank you.
It's a guy there with a big face. He'll talk to you
But
about
let's bring it down to specifics so that we can
That one.
get some press
This guy.
to it.
Yes.
Get people talking about it.
Yeah. This is the guy. You talk to him that runs that booth, he says 10 million people are dead in the last 10 years in the United States because he can't get his product out.
And I think along these lines, it may be helpful to bring up historical examples of drugs that had been approved in other countries but not yet approved in the U.S. because of the FDA process. And that's more, let's say, established knowledge.
Yes.
Because it took X number of years to approve this drug, and in the meantime, why people died from a certain condition, and you could attribute those deaths to the delay in the approval of the drug.
I think counting up the number of deaths is a powerful message. You get then people are going to listen to you.
Yes.
On the note of the message and what we're talking about right now, I haven't been part of this movement for as long as a lot of other people have, but I really believe that capturing the public interest when it comes to longevity is, when even a small number of people in the general public believe that this is not only like it's not science fiction, it's an inevitability, that force will snowball very, very quickly at that point. I think the best way of getting there is, and in my opinion, this has already kind of happened in the last year. We need a few of those, bombshell studies that are going to get picked up, by the mainstream media and everything. And again, that's already happening. But that's a great way to I guess win people over to the point of what I said earlier, that this is happening. It's not a matter of it needs to be voted on, or we need to. Our party needs to win, elections for it to happen. It's going to happen anyway.
And we're bringing attention to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And another thing too is the guy that was just talking about that claims there's 10 million deaths. He says, "I'm going to go complain to the FDA about this." He says, "Oh no, don't do that, please, because if you go complain to them until they find out who said that, they'll punish me. So please do not go and complain to them."
Yes, the FDA has way too much power to crack down on researchers. So, as an example, a researcher by the name of David Ishii was developing transgenic dogs, essentially Dalmatians that don't have some of the hereditary diseases that Dalmatians are vulnerable to. And in 2017, the FDA sent him a sternly worded letter essentially saying these transgenic animals are drugs. And this was really shoehorning because the FDA has authority over food and drugs, but not over animals as such. So in order, yes.
Going along with that, Gennady, that's really an excellent point. But I think that taking it into the public arena is far better than trying to deal with the FDA. Let's not waste our time with that. The main thing is when the public is angered or shocked by some facts that come out, not hearsay, but facts that come out, and it's put in an article or espoused somewhere in a public platform, then people become annoyed by it. And so I think of all the time that many people are wasting on Facebook repeating Trump is this or Trump did that. I don't want to hear it. I've unfollowed so many people. I want to hear that something else that is more maybe that would shock people. So if you take all those Trump posts on Facebook that people are angry about Trump, let's get angry about something that means something.
The 110,000 people that die every day of preventable aging.
Yes. Now that, so if you could take every Trump message that's put on Facebook by many of our transhumanist friends, get off that, focus on something meaningful. That I would love to see. So maybe we could start creating those messages and send them out and tweet them and have them get out into the public for them to know about it.
Yes. Now it's interesting. One example of a situation when the FDA actually caved to public pressure was during the AIDS epidemic of the
Yes.
1980s, when the antiretroviral drugs were developed within a few years rather than a decade plus, because activists were staging demonstrations everywhere, and they were inspiring public outrage at all of the delays that the FDA perpetuates as a matter of course. So that was an example of a dire emergency, though, where people were actually dropping dead left and right.
There's so much
I think the
emotion.
problem's still there. It's still there. It's just not as high profile.
Right.
The problem still remains.
So how can we get to the point where the outrage about preventable diseases of old age is as high?
Oh, I think this is a discussion that we could certainly have, especially at the Transvision 2020 conference in Los Angeles. This could be a major theme within the conference. In Madrid too, because I left, and our conference in Madrid. So Humanity Plus could really help with this, because as an educational organization, we can plant the seeds for people thinking about these things. Don't you agree, Charlie?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. So actually this, once again, is where I think Zoltan Istvan did an excellent job with at least the concept of getting the public to be outraged at involuntary death with the coffin bus. You can't ignore a coffin driving around in your city. So how do we symbolically capture that sentiment once again?
You have to convince people that aging is curable, but that those 110,000 people a day, that becomes a tragedy the minute the public thinks that it didn't have to happen. And so it's I sound like a broken record here, but that those bombshell studies, like the proof that's coming out now, that's what people need to see, because then that turns that.
So what is the vehicle? Okay, so that's
right.
Okay, I'm thinking about my talk about the body vehicle, longevity vehicle.
Right.
But no, what is the vehicle? So we are the vehicle. Do we have a T-shirt that we wear all the time? Do we have a hat? No, what is our message? How do we use the social media to not promote any one person, but promote a message? So it goes back to Marshall McLuhan, the medium is a message. Well, what is the medium? What is the vehicle for this message? Now, a bus, yeah, it's too old and broken down and didn't get a new body. But then they go to the bumper stickers again, but billboards are really expensive, right? And an ad on TV is really expensive. But so you take a look at the demographics. We all watch TV pretty much, right? My students do not watch TV. They play games.
Right.
Okay, so now in the gaming industry, there needs to be a game or a AAA that is going to put this somehow in a game. But the younger people aren't so concerned about this, but they need to be alarmed about it. Because if you were younger and gay, you could get AIDS. So if you're younger and gay or not gay, that doesn't matter, you could die. So the vulnerability of our life and the fact that we could die at any moment based on someone else preventing us to live or an accident, that message is so strong, how to protect ourselves. So what I think the bottom line is, what is the vehicle that the message is going to be transported in?
Yes, and I really like the idea of a game to communicate the necessity of life extension. Indeed, I've been thinking along these lines of having some sort of virtual world in which transhumanist politics can be instantiated, where we could show the consequences of the transhumanist ideas if they were implemented in practice, perhaps contrast them with the world that would exist without transhumanist ideas, and get people somehow to be immersed in that world and interact with it, become drawn to it, so that instead of spending their time on pointless social media arguments, they go to a place that actually teaches them and allows them to participate in it. Now, there are certain games already, the multiplayer games like Second Life, that allow a great deal of creativity. Minecraft is another example where you can create entire cities that exemplify your vision. One limitation, of course, is to play one of those games, you have to sign up for the game, you have to kind of pass through a learning curve. So is there a way to capture the elements of those games that are important for our message without requiring people to purchase the game itself?
Yeah, okay, so then that's something to contemplate,
Right.
to think about.
Right.
A VR experience trip or something like that. So something that you don't actually have to play through, that you just experience.
Yes. Go ahead.
Like David, right? I'm very new to this group, and I embrace the ideas because I've read about it. I've seen you on your presentations. I think it sounds like it's semantic quibbling, but what does the public really know about transhumanism? What does that elicit? I've asked people about that. I've engaged them in conversation. Most people don't know what it is. And so I think any group, even with the noblest ideals, which of course this does present, can only be successful if there's public support and awareness. So how do we get through the semantic quibbling of what transhumanism really is? Secondly, I concern myself a little bit about the fact that while it is a party in every way, if that might alienate people, as opposed to maybe using it as a movement.
It is a movement.
It is a movement.
But if you call it Transhumanist Party,
Yes.
people may already get some kind of an idea. Of
Maybe there needs to be a kind of like
movement that threatens their own police. I'm just throwing.
Well,
maybe they're
I think we can steer. I think we can steer into that.
Yeah.
And Natasha Vitamore mentioned this at a Humanity Plus meeting yesterday and alluded to this idea that transhumanism has an outsized image relative to its numbers, that there's a certain kind of fascination that people that have with these ideas. It gets to maybe some existential questions that they start to ask themselves. And we can use that fascination to draw people into conversations about techno-optimism more broadly and life extension, these things that are so near and dear to us.
So actually, to his point though, maybe there needs to be a consideration of a kind of like some way to kind of direct the public attention when it comes into it. Because as he brings up like the movement aspect, Humanity Plus has been doing the educational movement aspect of it for a long time now. USTP handles the political actions and movements of it. So there are various organizations affecting several life, but you are correct that maybe if you walk into one of these groups, you aren't aware of, what other groups there are that can be either that maybe you fit into better, that you yourself would like to work in, or that that is doing what, okay, so they're working on it, maybe I can help them with it. As you said, so the USTP is the political aspects of it, and if that's what you want to work on, then this is the place to do it. If it's the educational movement on it, then Humanity Plus would probably be the better aspect to volunteer your time to.
Yes.
So it depends where, and maybe there needs to be like a family of transhumanist groups or recommended groups, and like if you're looking for this, go to here. If you want to help here, go to here. And maybe that can help, like, so you can point to that when you're talking to people. You're like, so I'm working with them, but maybe you'd be interested here, etc., so that there's a place we can more easily direct people to where they can find the information as to where they can help with.
I think, yes, we should all essentially promote one another's activities if we are aligned in our goals. Then informing people that these allied organizations and their initiatives exist is important. But to your two questions, your first question was most people don't know what transhumanism is still, and right, how can we galvanize them? Well, I think this presents an opportunity, because if you come across someone who doesn't know what transhumanism is, you can shape the narrative about transhumanism in the eyes of that person. You can be an ambassador for transhumanism and explain your best understanding of that term, hopefully as informed by looking at the literature, looking at the platforms of organizations like the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And
yep, I was about to say.
There it is.
She's got a nice clean book.
Now this is just a short little how-to, what is it, book. But I've got a thicker book, and it has 42 experts in the worldview of transhumanism from various perspectives: AI, nanotechnology, life extension, biotechnology, cryonics, philosophy, ethics, etc. With the earliest writings.
And I think that book actually gives me an idea for us as well, that we also need a short literature pamphlet that we can pass out, or we can pass on to other people to explain what it is in terms of the political party itself.
Yes. So we have our party documents, our platform, the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, the core ideals. If we put it into a pamphlet form,
some kind
perhaps.
of pamphlet that can be shared or passed on.
Yes, go ahead.
In respect of attracting people, and I'm thinking that maybe it's wise to offer them something that is already familiar, that they know how it works. And what about, well, I know that we're a party, we're an educational establishment, and maybe it's not for us to do, maybe we need additional help, but what about creating like transhumanist health insurance company?
Yes.
You know, so basically it will be like one place when a person who is mildly excited about transhumanist ideas and curious can go and reach all those resources. It will offer practitioners, doctors who are well trained in this area. It will offer all life extension options that people can use legally, and of course it will grow all those treatments. But it will be a platform where a person can go, join, and use it. It might be just additional satellite health insurance.
So
people
it's
know
an
the
interesting
concept
notion.
of health insurance companies. They know how it works, and it will be health insurance.
Well, I think
companies are
health
bad.
insurance will be a difficult one, but I think that goes right into what we were discussing about a directory at some point, and I'm sure if such a thing is made, then we can promote it, but I don't know if it's within
we can't do it directly within the party. It's an interesting idea, but as
No, I didn't mean to. We could offer a prize to put this together. Create a Humanity Plus could offer a prize, maybe a couple $1,000 for someone who puts together a
longevity directory, essentially.
Well, not just that, but the template for other communities putting it together. Like you're thinking local, where do you go? But it could be local, global. But yeah, I think it could be both. Like I know in Scottsdale, where I live, my doctor supports my views, and when I go in, he calls me doctor. You know, he doesn't look down to me, which is good. I think that's a first step. You know, my tax accountant. For Humanity Plus is a Mormon, totally not into these ideas, but he respects them. My attorney totally respects them, again, not into them, but he totally respects them. So whether it's insurance or education or your attorney or tax accountant, whatever, they need to have respect for your views. And I think that they don't have to believe in it, but just respect it. And understand the options, because they're learning. It's new to them as well. But I think that when we start getting into the area of hard medicine and soft medicine, and hard science and soft science, it gets a little squirrely. You know, some people will say, "Oh yes, try this, try this." So I really don't. I wouldn't suggest.
Yes. So I'll say this. As an insurance regulator in another life, while I personally would support the proliferation of health insurance companies of this sort, the practical barriers are extreme. At minimum, one would need several $1 million of starting capital for such a company, and even then, I would say the compliance burdens are not worth it. Even say in another area where I have more specialization, car insurance. Tesla recently offered a car insurance program for owners of its automobiles because Tesla believes that its automobiles are significantly safer than conventional insurers are willing to recognize. And I agree with Tesla's evaluation there, but in order to offer this product, Tesla actually had to partner with established insurance companies because those companies had overcome the regulatory hurdles in their state. So they have the capital, they have the compliance infrastructure, they're spending the overhead to comply with various financial reporting requirements. And I think for that kind of plan, for an innovative longevity health insurance initiative to take hold, what would need to happen is an existing health insurer would need to be convinced of the benefits.
Yeah, and that's what happened with cryonics. You know, cryonics didn't create its own life insurance policy. It partnered with New York Life Insurance, which is a highly reputable insurance company, and now there's another company that's, and then, well, Rudy would be able to speak about this far more intelligently and articulately than me. But yeah, that type of partnership, so you have to find the established industry or company within that industry that is willing to have an adjunct.
Yes, David.
Yeah, I'm just curious. This is a great conversation. Going back to the 2020 election cycle and wondering how we can take and get publicity points out of this. How can we drag media into this? How can we generate getting this message out? The discussion among us is wonderful and I love it, but we've got to get it outside.
Yes.
So are there publicity stunts, for example, that we can do?
Ben, what publicity stunts were you thinking of?
Ben is really, he's got some good narratives.
Yeah, I guess there's a great many things like this that we can be focusing on that might veer a little bit to political theater. I think we can use that quite a lot. I think that of the Futurist New Deal for America, the e-governance elements, specifically blockchain voting and i-voting, we know a lot of people who are very interested in crypto and blockchain. There's a lot of people blogging about this. We're starting to get plugged into some of these networks and channels so that they can be talking about this blockchain voting option that would be available in every state. And I would also say that of this e-governance notion more generally, we were talking a few questions from Rudy and Gennady talking about resisting the partisan emotional noise, resisting this kind of strange cycle. And digitalization and e-governance, it is very much post-partisan undertaking. There's nothing terribly controversial about digitalizing services in every sector. It's just improving the functionality of said. And this, I spoke at great length with Estonia e-governance presenter Florian Marcus. A key campaign advisor and organizer, Kimberly Forsyth, has actually taken a job in Estonia working with them. And what they've done in e-governance is quite incredible. They have a full i-voting system, a full blockchain voting system. 55% of the people in that country use this option. And they have a whole manner of other e-governance services. And now, because they've done this good work of digitalization in these various sectors, now they're on the verge of being able to do this with personalized medicine through the public health service. So they are very close, like what Paul Spiegel is doing in San Marino, like what the Israelis are beginning to do. They are very close to having public health initiatives that would allow for us to be shifting towards anti-aging. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure," and we can be using those trillions of dollars here that we spend in the United States effectively for end-of-life care, much more effectively by shifting, by flipping the script there and shifting to public health initiatives that are focused on life extension.
Would it?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you doing regular press releases to be able to get interviews for print, TV, and radio?
Yes. Yes, we are putting together precisely this kind of press kit. This is something that Zoltan Istvan, the founder of this party and predecessor, done very well. We're coordinating with him on that as well.
Are you going to be doing any direct marketing directly to the media outlets to increase their chances of interviewing you?
Yes, we are going to be doing that as well. If anybody has any suggestions as to whom to be in contact with, feel free to email me.
Centralized email for suggestions.
Centralized email. Well, at first, send the suggestions to me. I have my email address on my business card, as well as to Ben. You have a Ben Zion 2020 email address.
Yes, benzion2020@gmail.com is a good place to reach me. You all paid a lot of money to be here. The very least I think I can do is be your representative. Even if you're not a member of the Transhumanist Party yet, I consider you as life extensionists. I consider myself to be at your service. So please feel free to email me with any suggestions or notions of any kind. I'd be overjoyed to speak with you.
Yes, David, you had something to say.
Yeah, and this is something I'd be happy to talk at more length about later, but I come from a marketing and sociological background.
Excellent.
And something I always think is really interesting is if you're doing a survey or polling people, the way that you ask the question is extremely important. You can get tremendously different results just based on how you're saying something, even if you're saying the same thing. You guys probably know a lot about this just from talking with people, but are you doing anything in terms of surveying and polling people to kind of to test what the public's favorite things are?
Perhaps something along the lines of do you support transhumanism? How would you know? Like a questionnaire or something run on Facebook or something.
Yeah, what are your first? When you hear about this, how does it make you feel? What are your first impressions? What fears?
So both as a survey and as a directed information.
But to keep it, that's good. But we have so many surveys on transhumanism. I think to keep it based on the governance, to keep it on the political agenda, not just generally transhumanism.
Absolutely,
yeah,
within the
because
party context,
we don't. Because there are so many transhumanist organizations and groups that are doing work. So I think that the main thing is to stay focused on some of the political issues. The FDA is a very good one. The number of people that are dying because of the slow process that we have here in filtering through, what can be patented, what
But I think I get what you're saying there, because actually, I'm imagining essentially everyone loves taking those Facebook quizzes.
There is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
There is a pretty good one for the de facto life extensionists. It's how do you know if you're the de facto life extensionist? Do you own a digital device of any kind? Would you consider buying another digital device in the future? And then the follow-up question: if you are feeling unwell, might you consider going to a doctor again in the future? If you answered yes to these two questions, congratulations, you are a de facto transhumanist.
Now let's get serious. Then okay, how are we going to deal with something? Yeah, I mean that could be the entree into getting the attention, and then a few serious questions that deal with governance, blockchain voting, e-governance, etc.
I guess my point was basically that, as a party, we need to be concerned with optics, from the public standpoint, and other political parties, they spend tens of millions of dollars on exactly what I'm talking about.
But they have a PAC.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's the PACs that do it, not
right.
I mean, yeah.
Sure, and it sounds like, maybe, you're talking about a PAC, maybe we can start bridging that gap.
Yeah, we haven't decided what to call it, whether it's a transhumanist, American PAC, or global PAC, but it needs, and it's going to be inclusive.
I was a fan of GTAC, Global Transhumanist Action Committee.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, I can't remember, I think it was 1997, no, actually it was 2001, to be perfectly clear. My brain, I still can't find my brain. It's still, okay. No, to be serious, 2001 I came up with an idea called the Progress Action Coalition. And I was pitching it at the XP Institute conference in Silicon Valley. And of course Ray was there, and Eric Drexler was there, Marvin Minsky was there, so we had the crux of, and Ralph Merkel, who created the blockchain tree. He needs to be given credit every time blockchain's mentioned, because he actually is the blockchain, father of blockchain, I guess. So I saw that we needed to break through some of these issues, the governance issues, political education, STEM, make it STEAM, etc. But unfortunately, right before that, I found out that the biohacking I did on myself caused cancer. So, but bottom line, I did give my talk, but I didn't create the coalition because I had to have surgery. However, in 2004, we put on a summit, and we brought together Ray Kurzweil, Nick Bostrom, of course Max Moore, Christine Peterson, the thought leaders in transhumanism and the future, a number of others. We came together and we came up with the pro-action principle. And it was through that pro-action coalition, which I couldn't build out, but we created the pro-actionary principle, which is a principle that is a balance between the precautionary principle and loosey-goosey, what to do, free fall with any laws and rules and regulation. So the government in the United States and most governments throughout the world rely on something called the precautionary principle, meaning that any scientific research or technological innovation cannot be used or supported unless there is no sign, no evidence of any wrongdoing or mishap. We wouldn't have cars, we wouldn't have airplanes, we wouldn't have toothbrushes,
right.
Electric toothbrushes, if that was the case. So the regulation was so strict on any novelty, any newness, that it couldn't happen. So this gets back into the FDA type of thing. So the pro-actionary principle is something that should be supported in any political or legislation or policy making, because it puts the burden of proof, here's the nitty gritty of it, puts the burden of proof on both sides. The way things have been done and the way it's being suggested we change through creating more a timely, technological, sophisticated arena of discussing any issue. So that's the whole pro-actionary principle, along with that morphological freedom, the right to your body. And this should be a civil right.
Yes.
And then that would break through all the problems that we're facing today. And I think that, going back to your issue of how do we get this marketing out, and your issue of what is transhumanism, how do we let people know? Would you think do you have the right to go to a doctor? Do you have a right to dye your hair? Do you have a right to have surgery? That is your right. It ought to be pronounced as a civil right. And as well as the pro-actionary principle. Well, when someone, you don't have to use those terms, but the logic is there. Well, who says it's going to work? Well, let's put the burden of proof on all sides of the issue, not just the anti.
Yes, and morphological freedom is strongly represented in the USTP platform right now, and I certainly support the pro-actionary principle. I would be happy to publish more literature on our website about it. What I think could be done is the creation of memes, concise statements, and imagery that communicate these concepts.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So then do we go into comics? We go into a comic book, a graphic novel. I think, of course, the main thing is we need a feature film. But putting that aside for the moment, the more documentaries we have, the better. Now, Netflix, who would talk about partnering with an established organization to have an adjunct, as you were saying, insurance company to have an adjunct area that would support transhumanist agenda. Perhaps there's someone at Netflix we could partner with.
Yes, this is quite interesting. Time flies. We are at 10 a.m. at present, so we've met for 90 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. I think this was a really productive exchange.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, we're doing a documentary, as you were talking about. You need it, so it was a really passionate conversation, but we would need your consent, so we can use it.